Okay, so here we go. Now we get to the fun part where we can start, thinking about our composition, thinking about our artwork and putting everything together. So what I've done is I've just imported that style frame into After Effects, and I'm just going to drag that over to here. So you can see that this is actually in my main timeline comp, and I've still got my movie clip comp over here. So this is kind of our style frame. Now what I'm going to do is drag our clip, our composition, over into our main timeline composition. And you notice that the bounding box is this size here, because this footage is actually 4K. It's 3840 by 2160. I'm going to start getting into the animation and how kind of adding things to it rather than going through all of the options in the timeline and everything. So I'll leave that up to you guys to find all that out. So whenever you bring an asset into your timeline from your project window, each element has properties. So it's the properties that we can change over time. So if we twirl this down, you'll see that we have a transform property. And inside there, we twirl down, we've got anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. And corresponding numbers over here. So the anchor point is the center, which is at 1920 by 1080, because that's half of our 4K composition. Our position, so we can scrub these along and change that position whichever way we like, X and Y. So obviously X is going across and Y is going vertically. Now, the one thing to remember about the position is that this value, this property, contains X and Y. So this is your X value and that's your Y value. If we right click on here, we can actually separate those dimensions. Okay, so now we get an X position and we get a Y position. Okay, so that will become clear as we start animating things, because sometimes you don't want to animate over 2 dimensions, you only want to animate over 1 dimension. So it makes it easy to separate those now rather than later. We have a scale value. So obviously our 4K video, which is twice the size, so if we put 50 here, then it'll be exactly the same size as the comp. So we can scrub that up and make it whatever size we want. So one of the good things is that because this is actually a lot bigger, we can scale this down. We can scale that down without losing any quality because it's already bigger as it is. Obviously rotation, so it's plus 45. Okay, so if we type in 45, this is plus 45 degrees, and we can also go minus 45. Okay, so that will actually allow us to rotate. And we'll get more into this, and obviously our opacity is how transparent our layer is. Now, one of the key things about using After Effects are the keyboard shortcuts for these properties in here. If we press P, that will twirl down the position property. If we press R, that's rotation, S is scale, and T for transparency is opacity. They are your main key properties that you can use to change values for what you want your animation to do. So let's go to rotation and I'll set that back to 0. Okay, so at any time you can just rotate down and you can hit the reset button here, and that will reset your comp or your layer to however it was when it first came in. So if you mess it up, you can just hit reset and it will send it back to the way it was before. Alright, so I'm going to select P, and also want to control the scale. So let's do Shift S, and that will twirl down the scale property as well. Okay, so I'm just going to make this a bit smaller so it kind of fits in. Okay, and then if I hit the space bar, that will render. So you can see this line along here. What happens, this will tell you how your animation is rendered. So if you have a complex rendering, you'll have a red line, and then it needs to pre-render before it can play it. And this is very true of audio as well. If you have audio in there, you'll find that it'll just sound really weird, slow, but that's only until it actually has the final rendering done, and then it'll play back normally. What I want to do is actually trim this video a bit, because I think that's not the bit that I want. If we double click on our actual movie up here, this will bring us into the layer for that clip, so that movie. So you notice that our composition's gone and we're left with this different screen here. It hasn't gone away, so up here you notice that you've got footage and then you've got composition. So we can just click on there and that'll take us back to our composition. So we go over here. Now what I want to do is actually trim this clip. So a bit that I want starts there. So let's take it through to 10 seconds. So that's there. And then we can use these little in and out pointers here. So if we click the out button, this one here, that will then trim our clip to that. Now you can use the option left, so option alt left square bracket right square bracket to do the same thing. So go back to our composition and you should notice that. So I'll go back to our composition. If I double click on this composition here, truncating those clips is always a good policy, just so you don't have to deal with any extra footage. So setting the out point of your video is good practice. Let's go back to our main timeline. Alright, so we've got him here. I'm going to set the scale again. And I'm just scrolling in using the scroll wheel to scroll in. So this is how we want it to kind of look. So what we need to do is add some effects to this to get that to look the same. So over on the right hand side here, this is your effects panel over here. So over on the effects panel, this is where you can find and search for your different effects. Don't worry about some of these are all external plugins, so you won't have this list here. The main one that you'll be using is the color correction. So what do we want to do with this? So let's perhaps change our curves. So we can just drag that onto there, and then with our layer selected, we can now adjust these curves. So we can change the contrast, make it a bit contrastier. Let's make the colors pop a bit more. Alright, so that's one. So we can also find them in here. We can also search for them. So what I want to do is change the hue and saturation. So I just look for hue, and there's our plugin. Now the ones with the little 2 boxes here means that this is an accelerated effect. So they usually render a lot faster than just the normal ones. So we'll drag that onto the layer as well. And now we can start affecting these different values here for the hue. So you can saturate it, you can make it look a bit different. So just say for example you don't really like that look, we might go for something else. So now you can see you've got a completely different look and feel. So just go colorize. Now with this colorize, this is actually the value on the color wheel. So you just dial that into something you like. Let's boost up the saturation and make it a bit darker. Okay, so say we're looking for that kind of color instead. We don't like this one anymore, so we'll go for that one. So here again, if you see these bits that you think, well, that could use a bit more contrast, maybe we can boost that up a little bit, make it more of a tone dropout. Okay, so we've got flexibility in there. We can get rid of our style frame now. So what we've got now, we've just got our background clip. So the next step is we're just going to create what's called a solid. Okay, so if you go down here, you can right click and go new solid. The other alternative is to press Command Y or Control Y, and that brings you to the same box. I think you can even go up here and go new solid up here. So these are your keyboard shortcuts, so learn them well. So solid is really common. So basically what solid does is creates a container, if you like, that's the best way to describe it, which is just basically a container that has an opaque value when you first create it. So you can make it the comp size, which means it'll be the size of your composition, Or what we're going to do is make this say 1920 wide, and we'll make it 200 high. And you can change the color here, so we can make it whatever we want. You can also put in hex values, so 00000 is black, or RGB 000. So, and then we'll just call this one, make sure you label your layers. So I'll call this one text background. Okay, so what you can see here is that it's created this solid panel across the width of the composition. Now, what we do now normally is look for fill and then just drag that onto there. So fill is like an effect, and now you can change the fill color. So the beauty of this is that you can actually animate those properties. Just one thing to take a note of here. So let's just do our scale. So this is our type background, and we have a scale here. Now notice that there's this sort of stopwatch here on all these sort of properties. So scale has one there, curves has a little stopwatch. Everywhere you see that stopwatch, that means that that property is animatable. What we want to do, we can just hide this for now. So down in this panel down here, this is a little eyeball here. You can click that and you can hide that layer. You can also go down this column and you can solo that layer. So that means that all these other layers, if I had a bunch of layers here, they'd all be hidden. But I can actually solo that layer, so I can work on just that one and then turn it off, and then the others will come back. So same with that one. So it just means that you can focus your work on any particular area. We have our scale value down here. Now alright, so just watch how this solid scales. So if I drag this down, now you notice it's scaling just from the center. Alright, so this is where this little mark here, this is what's called your anchor point. So this is the point of change. So this is where your solid or your text or whatever you've got, this is where it's being actioned. So if I hit rotate, okay, it'll rotate around that point. Now we can change that so that if we change our scale to go from one side to the other, we put our anchor point right over on one side. Now to do that, we need to use another tool, which is this one here, the pan behind tool. Weirdest name, but that's just what it is. And the keyboard shortcut for that is Y. Okay, so if I hit Y, it's selected that pan behind tool. So now we can take our anchor point and we can actually drag it over to the left side over here. Go back to our pointer, which is V. So now when we scale, it's scaling from that point. Okay, so we can turn off, that means that our X and Y scale will be actually acting independently. So our X is first and then our Y. So now we can just change our X value and we'll move our position. So if we press Shift P, that adds position to here. So I'm going to separate those dimensions and put in 0 there. So that lines our object next to the canvas. So if we rotate this now, you'll see that it's rotating from that anchor point. Okay. Alright, so let's change the scale of this over time. So to set a keyframe on our scale, so we'll set a keyframe there. Now you notice you get this little blue dot here. So what that is a point in time for this particular property. Okay, so this is our resting point here. So this is where we want to finish up. If we drag our keyframe out there, and now we change our horizontal scale, and we make that 0, press enter. Now when we press play, we can see that we have our scale of our solid is now going from left to right. Pretty sweet. And we'll speed it up a little bit. Alright, so I'm just going to turn off those keyframes for a minute. So let's just click on that, and that just deletes them all. So all I want to do is just show you so we'll do some movement. Okay. So the way we do that is we set a keyframe there. Now another quick, really good tip is if you want to set a position keyframe, you just press Option P, and then that will set the keyframe. But it actually sets it for both X and Y. So whatever the position is, it'll set it for both. So this is our final resting place. And what we want to do, actually let's make it the other way around. Let's move it to the right. And if I just move my X value, you can see that now it just goes across the screen. So let's speed that up a little bit. If you want to zoom in on this timeline, you can hold Option Alt and then just use the mouse wheel, and then you can get all the way down to each frame. So these are the frames that we've got. So just say we want to go to this distance and we want to go in there in half a second, then we'd do Shift page down, that's 10 frames, and then 2 frames in, that's 12 frames, so that's half a second. So I'll probably make it a bit faster than that. So now it's going there to there. Okay, just to show you. Okay, so I'll scroll back down. Now, when we're working on our work area, you notice that, when I hit the space bar, it's just playing the whole clip. Now, because I'm only working on this little bit, I'm going to reduce my working area down to here, so that now when I play, it'll just play that little bit that I'm working on. Okay, I'm just going to space that out a bit. So it's probably the most boring animation ever. The type of keyframe we're looking at here is what's called a linear keyframe. Now I'm probably going to do a whole video on how to use these keyframes properly with graphs and curves and things, but in the interest of brevity, if you select that keyframe and hit F9 on your keyboard, this is called Easy Ease. So I can actually, if I just Command Z and right click on that keyframe, we can do Keyframe Assistant Easy Ease. So that's that's F9. So basically what that means is that it starts off slow, gets quicker and ends slow. Can't really see it that good, so let's do that. So you can just see that movement's a little bit more natural, but I will get into that a lot more as we move on. Alright, so we've got our properties animating. So as you can see, we've got some scaling happening now, and it's looking a lot better. So we'll just continue on now. So you notice that when it gets to this point, it's finished the scaling, but it's still moving. Alright, so the timing of these things is how you get your elements to work well together. So really it's up to you to control how these things kind of look, and you do that through this animation process. So obviously the shorter the distance between 2 keyframes, the faster your animation is going to happen. Now one thing that we might want to add to this is something called motion blur. So motion blur is basically how things look on film when they're moving. So if we turn motion blur on, we just hit this little switch down here. You'll also notice that this little blue switch here turned on as well. You can turn this on and off because motion blur takes a long time to render. And so now you can see that our little rectangle there is actually blurred. Okay, so it just makes it look a bit better. So sometimes you get these little artifacts where the blur is actually taking on the next frame. So, but I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so I've just downloaded a few files from the YouTube audio library, so I'm just going to preview these. Probably not. That one's pretty good. I like that one. Yeah, I kind of like that one, so I'll bring that into After Effects, which I've already done over here, but I'll do it again. I'll bring those other ones in. So the only ones I really liked was I think that one. So just drag them over into there, and now we've got our audio files into our project. So I'm going to bring in, say, let's do this one. So I'll just drag that down there, and if I press the space bar, okay, so that looks pretty good. We can try another one and we'll see how this other one goes. Yeah, I don't mind that, that's probably a bit more funky. So let's twirl those down, and we've got our audio levels, but we've also got this waveform down here. So the waveform shows you what those peaks and troughs are, so that gives you the point of where you're getting a beat. So if we bring this over, and let's say we want to animate to that point there, we can actually bring our animation over. We'll change animation in a minute just to make it more suitable, but you know, you can see that by applying those keyframes at that particular point in time, you're getting onto the beat of it. So this is a fairly consistent beat, and we can use those as points of animation. So let's just get rid of this, these keyframes. Just going to go fast forward here for a second just to tidy all this up. So if you go to Layer, Transform, and Center Point in Layer, that'll bring us our anchor point back into the middle. So we go with the line tab over here, we can go center and then center there. Alright, so let's start off with our scale keyframe. We'll bring that down to 0. And I'm just going to turn off motion blur for the moment. Okay, so I want that to go easy ease that. A bit shorter. Okay, so I want the video to actually go on that beat a bit better. So let's go, so maybe when he goes up like that, there. So maybe we can just move that. Try that. Okay, I'll keep that the same. We'll just move the video. Okay, so that kind of fits there. Okay, so you can see that just by moving things around. And what I might do too here is, because we've got a fair you know, I've got some good scaling we can do here. So let's change the scale of our video as well. So press S for scale, and we're going to position that in the middle, and I want to scale that so you're kind of getting a bit of a push in. Okay, so it's all about timing, about getting these things to sit right. Okay, so what I want to do is actually move that change that bar. So let's make it a different color. So I go to our effects controls up here, and we'll actually move that down. So because we haven't keyframed anything, I can just move down the Y position. Probably going to make that a lot shorter. Usually people do animation a little bit slow to begin with, but animation can be quite fast. Now, because when we turn on our motion blur, what we've got is actually that little bit there that sort of is blurred. So what I want to do is change the opacity. So if I press Command Option T or Alt T, I'll set an opacity keyframe. So make that 0. Go ahead, maybe 1 frame, and then set it to 100%. So that means that it doesn't actually start off at a blurred image. So it'll be a lot more seamless that way. Alright. And what I want to do as well, maybe just on that point there, I'll set a rotation keyframe, so Option Alt R, and now I've got a rotation keyframe as well. So I'm going to rotate that, so go ahead maybe 2 frames, and then I'm going to rotate that something like that. Okay. So I'll just drag these over a bit, just so we get a sense of it turning. And I might increase that scale just so that it covers the whole clip. And then once it gets to that point, maybe I'll bring that back down to 0. And then I want to ease all those, so F9 to ease those. Okay, that looks a bit naff. So as you can see, you come up with an idea and you think, yeah, that might be alright, but then, no. So we'll just leave it up there. So now they're just going up and then rotating. Alright, so let's bring some text into this. Okay, so the text tool is available just by either clicking on here or hitting Command T. So Command T selects our text tool. Okay, so I'm just going to type in here Richard Jones. Alright, so this is some text that we want to work with. So once again, text comes in as its own layer, but I've got access to all the properties of that text over in the effects panel over here. So we can go for, I'll go for a different font. You can change the color. So anytime you see the little eyedropper, so we can take that eyedropper, and if you want to make it match in here, we can just select the color in here, and that'll make it the same color. So just change the size. I'll just make that black actually because I want it to match the panel. Okay, so if that panel comes in, you'll see that now the text is actually above. Okay, so the way I'm getting that move arrow is just holding the Command or Control key down, and then I can move my objects. It's the same as Illustrator and Photoshop, they're all the same. Alright, so we want our text to be above, so that's good. And I'm going to make that all caps. And I'm going to make that white. Okay, so if we look at the rotation here, now if you get to this point where you've closed up, you've twirled up all your panels, and all you want to see are your keyframes, you just press U on the keyboard, and then you can see all your keyframes. So it'll only just display those properties that are keyframed. Okay, so our rotation is minus 14 degrees, so let's set our keyframe here to our rotation on here to minus 14. Okay, so you can see that we've got that coming in. Alright, so what I'd like to do is actually have that kind of flickering and then maybe scale up. So let's just trim that here. So it's Option left square bracket. So what that does, it'll trim it to there. So when it gets below there, it's not there. So I'm going to move ahead 1 frame, maybe 2 frames, and then Option right square bracket, and that'll trim it to there. So now we've got it not there, on for 2 frames and off. So like that. Now once we've got this here, if I hit Command or Control D, that duplicates that layer. There's no other way to really do it, so that's one keyboard shortcut that you really need to know. So duplicating anything in here, in any of these panels, you just press Command D or Control D, and that'll then duplicate it. Alright, so let's just move that over a couple of frames. I'll zoom in a bit here. So now I want to change the scale to say 50%. Now you notice that that's scaling from the bottom left hand corner. I'd actually like it to scale from the center. So if we go up to Layer, Transform, reset the anchor point to the middle, and now I want to bring that down there. Okay, so now we've got, and now it's going, I'll just drag that over so it doesn't overlap. So now we've got this size, that size. Okay, so what we can do is actually, okay, so now we've got those 3 kind of sets of frames there, and I'll just duplicate the last one, and so now it's going back to where it was. I want to change my position property, so it's Option P. Now remember, I want to change this so that it's not a single value anymore, so we do separate dimensions, and now we can keyframe X and Y. So one of the principles of animation is called anticipation. So basically it just means setting up a movement for another movement. So we might actually bring that here and just hold that for a few frames. So when it plays, it just gives it that little bit of a delay before something happens. So with anticipation, what we do is we just add a little bit of movement in the opposite direction, so that when it goes there, it'll go back. Sorry, I've got to go the other way. So it's very subtle there. And I'll press F9 again to ease those. So you can see there's a bit of a movement back. I'll probably just have to leave it there. Alright, so you get an idea about what sort of things you do, and they're fairly simple procedures to use. Just some keyframes, go to the next frame, change things, go to the next frame. So this is kind of frame by frame animation, and you do a fair bit of that in After Effects. But I'm going to leave it here, and good luck, and see how you go, and have fun. Okay, thanks, bye.